Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the first week of the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah, quite weak.
Our sources this week, they've meticulously detailed the court proceedings, and our mission here is really to pull out the crucial insights for you.
Definitely.
At the heart of this deep dive are these really serious accusations against Combs. Racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transporting individuals for prostitution.
And the stakes, they really couldn't be higher. Combs, he's pleaded not guilty, obviously. But, that potential for a life sentence, it just underscores the sheer severity of these charges.
Absolutely.
And what's particularly noteworthy, I think, as we start, is the backdrop, This trial is happening when scrutiny of powerful figures, especially in the music industry, is just so intense.
That context definitely shapes how you look at these allegations.
It has to.
Okay, so let's look at how the prosecution is approaching this, because it's not just about, individual instances of abuse they're alleging, right?
No, not at all.
They seem to be painting this picture of Combs as the head of a criminal sexual enterprise. What's the key distinction there?
Well, the RSCO charges are absolutely central to that. If you boil it down, RSCO, it alleges a larger organized pattern of criminal activity. It's not just isolated incidents.
Right.
So the prosecution, their aim is to show that Combs allegedly used his, considerable resources and influence, his network, to facilitate this broader criminal operation.
That sounds like a much higher bar to clear than proving, say, individual acts of abuse.
It is. It definitely is. It requires showing that pattern, that enterprise.
And then on the other side, you've got the defense. They seem to be acknowledging a history of domestic abuse and what they called a bad temper.
Right, they conceded that.
But they're arguing pretty forcefully that this doesn't automatically mean sex trafficking or racketeering. What kind of tightrope are they walking there?
It's a really crucial distinction they're trying to make.
Yeah.
The defense is essentially saying, look, yes, there were problems in these relationships, maybe even domestic violence. But those issues, they argue, don't rise to the level of federal crimes like sex trafficking. And their pretrial strategy, you saw it even in jury selection, right? When they brought up the Cassie Ventura assault video from CNN.
Yeah, that was notable.
It indicates they're trying to manage the impact of that, potentially really damaging evidence, by acknowledging certain past behaviors, but then denying the core federal charges.
We also have a pretty formidable array of legal minds involved here. Judge Aaron Subramanian presiding, Emily Johnson leading the prosecution, and then the defense team. You've got names like Tene Geragos, Mark Nifolo,
Brian Steele, Anna Esteval, Xavier Donaldson. Yeah, significant team.
It's clear both sides are bringing in, serious legal firepower.
Absolutely. And it's kind of interesting. The restrictions in the courtroom itself, no cameras, no video allowed, just sketches.
Right. Only courtroom sketches.
But despite that, the public interest seems, palpable. You hear about the long lines outside the courthouse.
Yeah. And Combs' family being there, his mother, some of his children, it highlights the very personal dimension of all this, despite the huge legal implications.
It does. A very public yet very personal situation.
Okay. Let's dive into day one, those opening statements. Prosecutor Emily Johnson, she came out with a really clear, forceful message, didn't she?
She did.
Reiterating the accusations, arguing Combs allegedly used his whole empire basically as a tool to exploit and harm women. She specifically emphasized coercive crimes.
Yeah, making it clear this wasn't just about, private sexual preferences.
Yeah, exactly.
And what immediately stood out was how the prosecution framed those core allegations. They detailed the alleged trafficking of Cassie Ventura and another woman, just called Jane. And they introduced that term, freak-offs. These alleged drug-fueled, multi-day sex marathons orchestrated by Combs.
Right, where he allegedly called himself the king.
Yeah, that detail came out. These early details, they're clearly designed to establish this narrative of control and exploitation right from the very beginning for the jury.
And the specific acts alleged against Ventura, laid out right there in the opening, they were quite stark.
Very.
The alleged rape, that 2009 SUV stomping incident, the alleged cover-up after, and then the blackmail using graphic videos, it paints a really disturbing picture.
Definitely. And the allegations about Jane also sound deeply troubling. Her introduction to these freak-offs back in 2020, the alleged financial control, and then being forced, allegedly, to participate in 2023, plus the mention of a sexual assault of an employee.
It all seems designed to support that broader idea of an enterprise, not just isolated incidents.
Exactly. By presenting these specific allegations, the prosecution is aiming to move beyond just general claims. They're providing concrete examples they hope will demonstrate that pattern of racketeering activity.
And including Jane and the employee allegations, it broadens the scope beyond just Cassie Ventura.
Right, suggesting this wasn't, a one-off situation, but potentially a mode of operation.
Right. Then the defense gave their opening. Taney Giroux goes. She conceded Combs has a bad temper, can be a jerk, prone to violent outbursts fueled by alcohol, jealousy, drugs.
Yeah, that was quite the admission up front.
It almost felt like they were trying to get ahead of some of the negative stuff that was bound to come out.
Well, it's a pretty standard defense tactic, right? By acknowledging maybe less damaging aspects of your client's behavior.
Okay.
You hope to gain some credibility when you then vehemently deny the really serious criminal charges.
Makes sense.
So admitting to episodes of domestic violence within what they call toxic relationships, it allows them to try and draw a clear line.
Right. Arguing those issues, however bad, don't meet the legal definition of sex trafficking or ICO.
Precisely. That's the core of their argument on
Okay.
that point.
And that line Giroux used, kinky sexual predilections don't equate to sex trafficking, and domestic violence is not sex trafficking. That seems like a central pillar for them.
Absolutely. That's the message they want the jury to hear, loud and clear.
Framing it all as love, jealousy, infidelity, and money, and dismissing the civil lawsuits as just money grabs, how effective do you think that might be?
Well, they're trying to categorize the freak-offs as consensual, right? Maybe unconventional, sure, but consensual activity among adults.
Using that swinger lifestyle label.
Exactly. Trying to normalize it a bit for the jury. But, as the trial goes on, the details coming out, they're likely going to challenge that characterization pretty hard.
It seems like a risky strategy.
It is.
Yeah.
Because even if jurors don't buy that it's criminal trafficking, the behavior described could still seem highly objectionable. And that could sway their overall view of Combs.
Okay. Then we moved into witness testimony. First up, Israel Flores, the former security guard. His direct testimony about that alleged March 2016 assault on Cassie Ventura in the hotel hallway, and the fact that security footage was shown multiple times, that must have been powerful for the jury.
Oh, absolutely. Visual evidence like that, especially of an alleged assault, is incredibly impactful.
And Flores' account describing Ventura's apparent fear, seeing a purple eye, Combs allegedly saying, "You're not going to leave."
It all feeds directly into the prosecution's narrative of control, of coercion.
And then the alleged bribe attempt, "Don't tell nobody," with a wad of cash.
Right. Flores said he refused it.
Plus, mentioning a third man in the room and Combs allegedly grabbing another guard's phone, it suggests maybe an attempt to cover things up.
Exactly. That's what the prosecution would argue. It raises questions about Combs's intent, whether he was trying to conceal illegal activity. That alleged bribe especially could look like consciousness of guilt to a jury.
Though the defense on cross-examination, they did get Flores to say Combs was cordial initially and didn't seem drunk or high.
They did. They tried to soften that immediate impression of aggression. Maybe suggest the situation wasn't as clear-cut when Flores first arrived.
Okay. Next witness was Daniel Phillip, a male escort or professional stripper. He testified about allegedly being paid quite a bit, actually, like $700 to $6,000 per time, to have sex with Cassie Ventura while Combs watched and directed.
Starting back in 2012, he said.
What does his testimony add to the prosecution's case?
Well, Phillips' testimony directly supports the charges of sex trafficking and transportation for prostitution. It introduces that element of commercial sex allegedly orchestrated by Combs.
Right, moves it beyond just a relationship dynamic.
Exactly. And that detail about Combs initially being kind of coy about who he was, it suggests maybe he knew these encounters were potentially illegal or problematic.
But what really stood out was his reason for stopping. He said he witnessed Combs throw a bottle at Ventura and drag her by her hair while she was screaming.
Yeah, that was powerful testimony. It provides a third-party account of alleged violence.
Which corroborates Ventura's claims.
Precisely. And it gives Phillip a reason for stopping, suggesting that what he saw wasn't just some consensual swinger lifestyle, in his view.
Okay, moving to day 2. That involved the defense cross-examining Daniel Phillip. They questioned him about his relationship with Ventura, asked if they'd had sex without Combs present, asked about her potentially being intoxicated. What was the goal there?
Well, the defense was likely trying to undermine Phillip's credibility, maybe muddy the waters a bit. It suggests he had his own motives, or that the encounters weren't always under Combs' total control.
And raising the intoxication possibility.
Yeah, maybe trying to suggest her judgment or memory could be impaired. But Philip stuck to his story, didn't he? Especially about Combs wanting the activity to continue even after the alleged bottle-throwing incident.
He did. He reiterated that Combs wanted them to continue, didn't recall Combs asking him to leave.
That's a significant point for the prosecution.
And then Cassie Ventura began her testimony.
Yeah, the key witness.
Visibly pregnant on the stand. She talked about meeting Combs back in 2005 or 2006. She was 19, he was 37. Signed to bad boy, and then right away described a relationship where Combs controlled, quote, every aspect of her life. Appearance, finances, who she talked to, driven by fear of physical abuse.
That testimony about control is just fundamental to the prosecution's coercion argument. The specifics she gave, like withholding money if she didn't comply. It paints a really stark picture of that alleged power imbalance.
And the alleged physical abuse, she said it started back in 2007. He would knock me over, drag me, kick me, stomp my head if I was down. Just brutal details.
Yes, setting a very disturbing, very visceral tone for how she described their relationship.
Then she talked about the 2016 hotel incident, just days before her first big movie premiere, she said.
Right, the timing.
And photographs of her injuries were shown. Gashed eyebrow, permanent scar, she said, swollen lip. And she even pointed out bruising in photos from the premiere itself.
That contrast, the premiere photos versus the injury photos, that's incredibly powerful visual evidence for the jury. And the timing, right before a major career moment for her, it underscores the alleged disregard for her well-being.
And then she got into the freak-offs, describing herself as sexually inexperienced when they met, and how Combs introduced her to these group encounters. Her first one, around age 22, she testified.
Right.
She said initially she did it to make him happy because she loved him. Felt confused, nervous.
But that changed.
Yeah, she testified it became humiliating, felt like a job. She reportedly cried during this part of her testimony. That shift in how she felt seems really key.
It's absolutely crucial. Establishing her initial inexperience, then describing how it devolved into something degrading and unwanted that directly challenges the defense's consensual swinger lifestyle narrative.
Her emotion on the stand, too.
That would likely have a huge impact on the jury's perception of her experience.
The graphic details she shared, the locations, aliases, the amount of baby oil, sometimes in a baby pool, it's quite striking, almost surreal.
They are striking. And while maybe uncomfortable, that specificity can actually lend credibility to her account.
Yeah.
It makes it seem potentially more authentic, harder to just invent.
And the alleged drug use she described, Combs providing ecstasy, cocaine to keep her awake for hours, sometimes days.
Up to 4 days, she said, was the longest.
In her saying she wanted to stay high, to numb herself, to avoid being present during emotionless sex with a stranger, and then developing an opiate dependency to cope.
That alleged use of drugs as a tool of control to facilitate these encounters. It's central to the prosecution's coercion case. Her description of wanting to be numb strongly suggests a lack of real consent.
And the later opiate dependency just underscores the potential harm.
The severe harm and exploitation she described.
She also talked about weapons, seeing handguns in safes at his places, being forced, she alleged, to carry a gun for him to a nightclub once.
Yeah, that specific incident.
And that time with Suge Knight where Combs and an employee allegedly grabbed guns and left in an SUV while she was screaming, fearing what they might do.
That introduces the element of potential physical danger, intimidation.
And then the alleged blackmail. Combs supposedly displaying freak-off videos, threatening to release them if she didn't behave or comply. That really escalates things.
It does. That alleged blackmail is particularly relevant for the racketeering charges, right? It suggests a potential method Combs used to maintain control and silence over her, understanding his capabilities, his access to guns, the threats that he made, as she put it.
And finally, those nicknames. Her calling him Pop Pop because of the age gap, him sometimes calling her Baby Girl. Little details, but they can hint at the dynamics.
Exactly. Seemingly minor things, but they can offer glimpses into the power dynamics, the nature of the relationship as she perceived it.
Okay, day 3. Cassie Ventura continued her testimony, providing even more explicit details about the freak-offs.
Yes, she testified Combs directed her and male escorts in specific sex acts.
And the jurors were actually shown images, sealed, still images from freak-off videos, but shown privately to them.
Yeah, a strategic move by the prosecution. Visuals can be more powerful than just words. And apparently one juror's reaction was noted suggesting they were impactful.
She reiterated the drug coercion allegations, adding ketamine and GHB to the list this time.
Ecstasy and cocaine were mentioned before.
And she described the physical toll UTIs, sores in her mouth, blacking out sometimes.
These details just further emphasize the unhealthy, potentially dangerous nature of what she was describing. The physical consequences really underscore the alleged lack of care, the potential exploitation.
And that text message she sent Combs. Nothing good comes out of FOs anymore. You treat me like you're Ike Turner. Wow.
That's a really potent piece of evidence for the prosecution. Her own words, comparing him directly to a notorious abuser, it cuts right through the defense's attempt to frame this as consensual.
She also talked about Combs allegedly hitting her, feeling unable to refuse these freak-offs, and that incident where he supposedly accused her of stealing drugs kicked her off a yacht.
Right, and she ended up staying in a hotel with his employees.
And she elaborated on the blackmail fear. Fear of career destruction, being portrayed as a slut, her saying, no one should do that to anyone. It hits hard.
Her fear of professional and reputational damage, it highlights the vulnerability she allegedly felt, the power Combs supposedly wielded over her, reinforces that idea that her participation wasn't truly voluntary.
Then the Kid Cudi incident. She testified Combs made threats to harm both her and Scott Mescudi when they started dating, allegedly wanted to blow up his car.
Yeah, that suggests a pattern, right? Possessiveness, control extending beyond just their own interactions. Alleged threats against a new partner really support the prosecution's argument about the extent of his control over her life.
And finally, that attempt to communicate through a book she wrote detailing her experiences, asking for $30 million for the rights, but being dismissed by his assistant, apparently, unsure if Combs even read it.
That whole episode, her attempt to be heard and the alleged dismissal, it could resonate with the jury. Reinforce the narrative that her feelings, her attempts at agency, were disregarded.
Okay, then day 4 arrived. The defense finally got their chance to cross-examine Cassie Ventura. Anna Esteval led the questioning. Reportedly started with a gentle tone, acknowledging their nearly 11-year relationship, that they'd been in love once. What's the strategy there?
It's a common tactic. Start softer, maybe disarm the witness, make them less defensive, acknowledge the positives early on, so later challenges seem perhaps more reasonable to the jury.
Their main tactic, though, seemed to be introducing hundreds of pages of texts and emails, trying to show Ventura as loving, sometimes even enthusiastic about the freak-offs, this war of texts, as some call it.
Oh, yeah, that was clearly a cornerstone of their strategy, trying to create that cognitive dissonance, that contradiction between her testimony now and her written words from the past.
Because those texts, if you just look at them without context, could suggest a very different dynamic.
Absolutely.
Like that 2008 email, I love you so much, or the August 2009 text, when do you want to freak off, lol, and her reply, I'm always ready to freak off. But then there were also later messages showing frustration, needing more than just sex, like a 2010 email saying, I don't need your money, I need some attention. It's complex.
It is. And it's important to remember, long relationships, especially ones described as toxic, often have these layers, these conflicting emotions. The defense is cherry-picking moments suggesting desire.
Right.
While the prosecution's job is to put it all back into the context of alleged coercion and control.
That 2012 exchange, the one about the last time to freak off, her saying, I don't want to freak off for the last time. I want it to be the first time for the rest of our lives.
It's affectionate, right? Wants the FOs to continue.
On the surface, yeah. But the prosecution later provided more context, right?
Yeah.
Which is vital.
How so?
Because without that surrounding context, those isolated lines could really undermine her claims. Providing the rest of the conversation allows the prosecution to show her feelings were maybe more nuanced, less enthusiastic than those snippets suggested.
The defense also hit hard on mutual drug use, opioid addiction struggles, suggesting the freak-offs were part of a swinger's lifestyle.
Trying to frame it as a shared choice.
Ventura acknowledged the drug use, called Combs an addict too, but she drew a line between the freak-offs and swingers clubs they apparently attended. Why is that distinction important?
Because she's highlighting the power dynamic. The freak-offs, as she described them, involve direction from Combs, which is different from a typical swingers club vibe. It pushes back against the shared lifestyle idea.
The defense even floated the idea that the 2016 hotel violence might have been from a bad batch of MDMA.
Yeah, suggesting an external factor. A way to explain the violence without admitting intent or a pattern of abuse. Deflecting blame.
They also kept bringing up alleged infidelity on both sides, trying to paint it as complex, volatile, toxic, but not criminal.
Right. Normalizing the dysfunction, in a way, arguing it falls short of federal crimes.
And asking if Combs' career was ruined after her lawsuit, she said, I could understand that. What's the point there?
Potentially suggesting a motive for her lawsuit, implying maybe revenge or financial gain played a role in her coming forward.
It was reported that Ventura asked for a break after reading some of those explicit messages aloud.
Understandable. Reliving that under cross-examination must be incredibly taxing.
While Combs apparently looked relaxed, and his lawyer called Ventura the most important witness, said they had hours more questioning planned.
It just underscores her centrality. The defense's main strategy hinges on challenging her credibility, her account. Her testimony is the bedrock of the prosecution's case.
Day 5. Ventura's cross-examination concluded and new witnesses emerged. The defense kept challenging the timeline of the alleged rape,
Pointing out inconsistencies in the day she gave, August versus September 2018.
and noting she didn't immediately text him saying, "You raped me." How effective are those kinds of timeline challenges?
They can be effective in casting doubt. It's a standard technique. If you can show uncertainty about key details of a major event, you hope the jury questions the reliability of the whole testimony.
They also highlighted continued communication after the alleged rape, affectionate messages, texts, even after she got married.
Combs texting love and light, her replying, have a blessed day.
And they questioned her about consensual sex allegedly happening weeks after the rape. Her explanation was, well, complex. We'd been together 10 years. You just don't turn feelings off that way.
That's a critical point for the defense. Ongoing contact, intimacy. It can weaken the narrative of constant fear. But her explanation, acknowledging those complicated emotional bonds in potentially abusive situations, that might resonate with jurors, too. It's very human.
The defense also went back to the 2016 hotel assault aftermath. Text showing Combs apologizing, proposing sex.
And her replying, we need a different vibe, but still signing off, love you.
And revealing she went to a spa in Sedona to detoxify from heavy drug use after the beating. It just keeps adding layers of complexity.
It really highlights that often cyclical nature you see in abusive relationships, conflict, apology, reconciliation attempts. The defense uses these to suggest a less straightforward victim-abuser dynamic.
Then they played that audio recording of Ventura threatening to kill a DJ over some lurid video of her, saying she'd cut him up, hide him.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a direct attack on her character.
And questioned her about an alleged physical fight with another woman back in 2013.
That's the defense trying to portray her as capable of aggression, threats, undermine her image as solely a victim, suggest maybe she has her own capacity for violence or intimidation.
And finally, they confirmed the settlements. $20 million from Combs, maybe $10 million from the hotel chain.
Bringing up the money, clearly suggesting a financial motive for her accusations.
But the prosecution countered that on redirect, right?
They did. Ventura got visibly emotional, reportedly crying.
And said she'd give the money back if it meant she never had to experience the freak-offs. I wouldn't have had to work so hard to get my autonomy back.
That's a powerful rebuttal. Directly addresses the financial motive implication, shifts the focus back to the alleged trauma, reinforces the idea her motivation isn't money, but accountability.
She also clarified Combs frequently suggested FOs, even when she had a UTI, and allegedly beat her during them more than once. Reiterated feelings she couldn't refuse, how her feelings changed to fear, and talked about her music career suffering, feeling like basically a sex worker. Only one album released from a 10-album deal. That highlights a huge personal and professional cost.
Absolutely. These points directly refute the defense's consensual participation narrative. They highlight the alleged coercion and the significant negative consequences she says she suffered.
And when asked point blank if she doubted the rape happened, she firmly said no.
Reaffirming that core allegation.
Plus, she gave that crucial context for the 2012 text exchange, showing she also wrote, I want to see you, but I'm emotional right now. I don't want to do one last time. I'd rather not do it at all.
Right, providing the full context. That significantly changes the interpretation compared to the defense's selective snippets. Shows a much more conflicted state.
Then a brief recross. She confirmed FOs were Combs' preference, but said she didn't know if participating was an explicit rule for being his girlfriend.
Yeah, acknowledging his preference, but leaving room for the argument that she felt implicitly forced due to the power dynamic, even without a formal rule.
Then we heard from Homeland Security Special Agent Yasin Binda.
Right, involved in Combs' arrest and searching his hotel room.
And he found items matching Ventura's descriptions of freak-off supplies.
Exactly. large zip-top bags, multiple bottles of Johnson's baby oil, Astroglide,
Wow.
various drugs too. Ketamine, MDMA, clonazepam, prescribed under an alias Frank Black. Pink powder tested positive for ketamine and MDMA.
Plus cash, mood lighting, a hard drive. That's tangible corroboration.
It is significant physical evidence that appears to back up Ventura's detailed accounts, lends credibility to her descriptions.
And finally, day 5, wrapped with testimony from Dawn Richard, former Danity Kane singer.
Yeah, worked with Combs from 2004 to 2011.
And she testified she witnessed Combs physically abuse Cassie Ventura multiple times.
Yes, including a specific 2009 incident in a home studio where Combs became belligerent over food.
Okay.
And she saw him hit Ventura on the head and beat her on the ground, allegedly dragged her upstairs by her hair. Sounds terrifying.
And another time involving a kitchen skillet.
Allegedly grabbed a skillet, tried to hit Ventura while she was cooking eggs. She fell into a fetal position. He punched and kicked her. That's what Richard testified she saw.
That's crucial third-party corroboration of the alleged violence.
Incredibly important for the prosecution. An independent witness, seemingly, recounting specific instances of abuse. It adds significant weight to Ventura's claims.
And Richard also mentioned Combs allegedly locking them in the studio, threatening them to stay quiet. And she has her own pending lawsuit against him, too.
Right, that adds another layer. But her testimony about witnessing the abuse and the alleged intimidation that builds the prosecution's case about a potential pattern.
And the prosecutor's even worried about the length of Ventura's cross-exam because she's pregnant. Risk of a mistrial.
Yeah, it just underscores the high stakes, the human element, the pressure involved here. Her well-being is obviously a major factor.
So reflecting on this intense first week, several key themes really jump out.
Definitely.
Cassie Ventura's testimony is absolutely central, and the defense is pulling out all the stops to challenge her credibility.
While the prosecution is laser-focused on building that pattern of coercive control, arguing it meets the bar for federal crimes like racketeering and trafficking.
And the defense keeps hammering that counter-narrative, toxic relationship, maybe domestic violence, but not trafficking.
And you see this fascinating battleground over the digital evidence, right? Those texts, the videos, the hard drive, both sides meticulously picking them apart to fit their narrative.
It really boils down to that fundamental question, doesn't it? Consent versus compliance. Especially when you have these huge power imbalances and allegations of abuse.
Where's that line? It's incredibly blurry and complex.
We're also starting to see a potential corroboration through other witnesses like Flores, Phillip, and especially Dawn Richard, and the physical evidence from the hotel search. That could be critical for the ICO charges.
Absolutely. The initial battle lines are drawn. The focus is intensely on Ventura's account and how you interpret all those texts and emails.
The prosecution's laid the groundwork for their criminal enterprise theory.
While the defense has vigorously attacked the charges, trying to portray Ventura as a willing, if maybe conflicted, participant in a lifestyle choice.
The next few weeks are going to be crucial. Can the prosecution meet that high legal bar for the federal charges?
A lot will likely hinge on the jury's assessment of Cassie Ventura's credibility and how they interpret all that digital evidence.
And the legal strategies, as you said, they'll keep evolving as more evidence comes out.
Which leaves us with a thought for you, the listener, to consider. In relationships marked by these significant power imbalances, by patterns of alleged abuse, how do we even begin to define consent? How do personal stories, digital footprints, and the cold letter of the law intersect when we're trying to find truth and justice?
It's a really complex interplay.
It is. And this trial is bringing it into incredibly sharp focus, something to definitely keep thinking about as these proceedings continue.